Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures Daily Dose of Nature. 4 amazing African safaris presented by Nat Hab's Director of Sustainability and Conservation Travel and Expedition Leader, Dr. Court Whelan. It's a pleasure to hear from you today, Court. I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thank you, Kendall. Well, I am extra excited to do this presentation today for a few reasons. One, so as an expedition leader, well, really just as a general traveler and a travel professional, when people, it's a common question I get asked, what is your favorite place in the world to go to? It's remarkably common, and it's hard for me. I can't not put an African safari somewhere in the near top of my list. Now, of course, you've seen me throughout the years, and maybe you've been with me on trips, and I have many favorite places. But African safaris they've got to be somewhere in the tip top. I could literally take anybody walking on the sidewalk, whether it's here in Colorado, in Manhattan, in the middle of Texas, in California, in Alabama, and I could take them from where they're at and put them on African safari, and they're gonna have the time of their lives. So you can imagine what that means for someone that actually really, is vehement about nature, loves nature, is a passionate traveler, an ecotourism person, not just someone at complete random. It is one of the best experiences you will ever have in your life. And I imagine there are a number of people in the audience today that have done at least one African safari. I'm sure you're all nodding your heads and thinking about the photo albums you have in the past, and it's really that extraordinary. The second reason I'm very excited is I just got the webinar attendance report, and it's breaking records for record number of attendees or RSVPs today, which makes me realize and happy to think that people are really thinking about travel and thinking about travel to Africa, and kind of that sort of pent up demand that we're realizing in the travel industry may be starting to materialize. Now, of course, this is not me trying to convince you that you should pack your bags today and do something out of the ordinary, but it is to say that, as we've seen over the past year, obviously things are sort of weird and wacky in the travel industry, and people have been moved to different years. We know that there's a ton of pent-up demand, and we're already seeing that realize with record number of travelers, bookings that are happening further in advance than ever before. Year over year, it's not uncommon for some of these really top premier, very authentic safari camps to book up 12, 14 months in advance. That's common. So when I say it's booking even before that, I wanted to let my folks out there know that, if you are thinking of safaris in the next couple or few years, it actually behooves you to indeed start thinking about it, start planning it. And that's where I wanted to deliver to you guys today a little bit of, I'll say comprehensive, but also a bit of a bird's eye view of the main quintessential safari areas in Africa. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get right into it. The first thing is, when you think about safaris in Africa, even if you've been on one before, throw all those preconceived notions about what it might be like out of your mind, because the way that we do our safaris, whether it's in any one of the 4 places or even beyond we're going to talk about today, it is a very, very extra special experience. It is a secluded, it's an intimate experience. It is authentic to know, and it's you think, okay, lions and leopards and giraffes and all that, but there's so much more to the wildlife experience. I have sat with guests and we've watched families of mongoose for hours just playing and going about their daily lives. Denizens like the wild dog that is found so prevalently throughout Africa, especially Botswana. Such an elusive, amazing creature to see when you go into these ultra immersive safaris. So it's the way we see, the way we further get out there, the way we understand the seasons, the wildlife patterns. We are essentially all wildlife biologists that are out in the field with you, finding these extraordinary creatures. And we do guarantee every traveler gets to see at least one baby elephant over the course of their safari. It's a guarantee. Actually, if you are going to book a safari, definitely tell our sales folks that Court Whelan guaranteed a baby elephant and just see what they say. I'd love to hear feedback on that. But nevertheless, the idea is that there's a plethora of wildlife, things that you might be expecting, might be hoping for, and then things are way out in left field, things that you might not expect to be part of a quintessential African safari. So we're talking about the classic safari wildlife, classic safari experience, and beyond. We're talking about an entirely different trip that gets to see one of the rarest primates in the world, the mountain gorilla. We're also including a foray into Namibia at the end of the presentation to talk about sort of, if there's one place that's most unlike the others, it's got to be Namibia, with so much wondrous stuff waiting. Something we're going to be highlighting today is the style of safari, where we're staying. These are smaller safari camps. These are not the big lodges. These are oftentimes known as semi-permanent camps. In fact, in a lot of these places, there are regulations that if something, you know, is deemed as interfering with migration patterns or wildlife movement patterns or water ecosystems, that must be removed within 72 hours. So a lot of times you'll see this wonderful kind of semi-permanent structure that is truly authentic, kind of like the safaris of yesteryear, like the things you've read in adventure novels, of course, with all modern day creature comforts and the views like here in northern Namibia. We're going to talk about the vehicles. We're going to talk about like the day-to-day kind of stuff. What would you expect from a day-to-day experience on wildlife safari in these areas? And of course, one of the top things with natural habitat is indeed our guides. We have some of the very best guides in the world, and I'm going to brag about this guy for a second, Tuto. He, you know, fantastic guy, good friend. As an example, he has won Safari Guide of the Year by Outside Magazine. This is a very, very top level award, and he's one of our key guides in Africa. So it's really great to know. I mean, it's that extra special part of the experience, that it's not just these most secluded camps and getting you to these wildlife rich areas and the seamless process of expedition planning, but it's also going with people that know it the absolute best. And, you know, it's not just that, it's like people that win awards for knowing it best. So it's pretty darn cool. So that's a sort of general overview. One thing I want to talk about is sort of, you know, what is Africa when it comes to African safaris? It's a massive continent, obviously. We're really zoning in on like two main different areas when we're talking about the vast majority of wildlife safaris. Yes, you could go to other areas of Africa, but it's mostly, I mean, very, very, very few people are going to go over here in search of like gibbons or, you know, in search of other wildlife. The high concentrations, the safari industry is really focused on East Africa, which is Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, and Southern Africa, which is primarily, at least in this presentation, Namibia and Botswana. But of course, South Africa is in there, and then Zambia and Zimbabwe, key areas. So one thing I wanted to put right out the bat is people often think, well, gosh, how do I delineate between the two? Where do I start? Should I go to Southern Africa? Should I go to East Africa? Should I combine the two? I will say these two areas, although they are touching in terms of these circles, it's almost a bit of a Venn diagram here. They're quite distant. So to go from East Africa to Southern Africa, you're really talking about almost twice the distance from New York to Miami. So it's not exactly like a quick hop and a skip. It's a very, very different region. So generally, I recommend if you are going to go to one region or the other and you want to do extensions, a couple extra days here or fly in early to go here, we're really kind of dividing the two different regions. In terms of all the other differences, there are a lot of similarities. There are a lot of differences. We're going to go over those on a little bit of a trip by trip level. And we're going to go ahead and start in East Africa. So scratch your head no more. We are going to get into the nitty gritty, the detail of what makes these African safaris great. So like I said, we're going to start with East Africa. And this is, you know, for so many reasons, it's kind of like the quintessential African safari. It is that out of Africa feel. It's the, you know, the massive Serengeti and Mara ecosystems with sunsets and sunrises for days, the sweeping plains, the rolling hills, these grasslands, the savannas. It's home to the Great Migration. We're talking about, you know, about 1.5 million wildebeest and 1 million zebra and everything that goes along with it. It is what oftentimes people think of first when they think of the classic African safari, and it is truly sensational. So one of the first trips I wanted to mention is to Kenya. It is our East African Migration Safari, or Kenya Migration Safari, as you'll see there, and it is indeed to go to see the migration. So I wanted to quickly talk about the migration. It's a little bit of a pixelated photo. I had to grab this from online, but it shows you the point that I'm trying to make here, is that the migration, although we do our trips, and you'll see a breakdown of this, I kind of give some little cliff notes at the end of every section of when our seasons are, to kind of talk about when that prime time is. When we talk about our safaris in Kenya, you know, we're usually talking about going somewhere from, let's say, like June through October. The migration's happening year round. And actually during the other months, it's in Tanzania, it's in the southern part of this massive ecosystem. And as you'll notice here, I'm sort of circling the Mara ecosystem. It is a much smaller area. And you think, well, wouldn't you just spend your whole time in the Serengeti? Why even go to Kenya? Well, the main reason is because this border right here, a good part of the border, and you'll see this with this little blue squiggly line, the Mara River is what a lot of people go to see. And this is the famous area of the river crossings where the wildebeest descend off the dusty shores, you know, through the water, stampeding in great numbers. And what it is it's a little bit of like a bottleneck to the migration. So you see them in just extraordinary numbers. But nevertheless, it is a seasonal year-round migration, and they're basically chasing food. It's kind of like what a lot of wildlife does. But this migration does happen. It just happens to be when we run our season, they're sort of back and forth, on this border, so we get to see them most predictably in the greatest numbers doing some of the most extraordinary things in all of wildlife spectacles. Of course, when we talk about the million wildebeest and the million zebra, we also have to think about the other safari wildlife that might be following these guys. This is the circle of life. This is Lion King. This is kind of, it's real. It's the real world, and predators do follow these migrations of ungulates, of things that, well, ungulate's a hoofed animal, but they're following food as well. So the great thing about focusing on a migration safari is not only do you get this extraordinary spectacle of the wildebeest and zebra and other antelopes, but it's sort of a magnet for the big quintessential wildlife as well. Your lions, your cheetah, your leopard, even things like your caracal and your servals, lesser cats that you might not even know are really frequenting these areas. So it's a really, really great place to base your trip out of. But of course, these areas, you're not lacking any other wildlife. Although a giraffe is never going to chase down a wildebeest if it's too hungry. These are plant eaters. They're mostly going to be using their long tongues to scrape acacia leaves off the tall trees. They're going to be around too, because it's a massive ecosystem. It's a very heavily protected area. Wildlife thrives. So, within this trip, you kind of get it all. You get this great spectacle that, makes all these Guinness Book of World Records, so to speak. Then you get really all the safari wildlife too, rhinos and elephants and giraffe, you name it. Of course, showing some photos of the camps on the Kenya trip, it's simply extraordinary. One of the main things that I will say is superlative here is that we are using what's known as a migration base camp. And apologies, it's got a little bit muddled down here with the text, but basically I wanted to show this image because this is a classic African safari camp. This is set up and broken down possibly between groups, or if the migration moves, it is very, very mobile. This is not like a semi-permanent camp. This is a completely mobile camp. And so you get to have the prime viewing, the prime area in this very out of Africa feel to follow the migration and follow all the other wildlife that is surrounding it as well. So you get this very kind of adventurous, kind of ephemeral feel, but with all the niceties. People often ask about the food of these trips, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the food of these safaris because that's not why we're there. But I will say, if I was given the choice of some of the meals cooked here in these remote rural areas in terms of quality and just like how much I like them, or some sort of Michelin star New York restaurant, I would almost always choose the safari meals because they're that good. That's really all I'm going to say about the food. But rest assured, Army marches on its stomach, and we absolutely take good care of that. So with all the niceties you see here, know that the dining experiences are pretty on par and then some. What a day in the life of a Kenya safari is like. Well, we always maintain a lot of flexibility because we are after the wildlife first and foremost. But generally what it is we have a morning safari, which is usually kind of like at dawn or quite early in the morning. We go out in these Land Rovers and Land Cruisers. I'll show you some more photos of what our vehicles look like here in just a bit. We'll do sort of a comprehensive overview because it does differ between regions. But we go out in the morning. We're usually out for about 3 or 4 hours. We choose that morning time because it is when most wildlife is most active. Once the heat of the day comes around, by late morning and early afternoon, the wildlife take a little siesta, and we return to camp and take a little siesta, or just relax at camp, recharge batteries, literally and metaphorically. And then we go out again in the afternoon. Usually it's all timed with sunrise and sunset, but usually let's just say like 3 or 4 p.m. Generally out until dusk or just a little bit beyond, because that's again when you have another spike in wildlife activity. And we're hitting the two most active parts of the day. And it's also great for temperatures, it's great for sun, it's great for photography, it's great for wildlife patterns and movement, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really nice the way we time that, but that's generally a day in safari. Now, of course, as we're moving to a different camp, where we might be taking a short flight somewhere, or we might be doing a balloon safari in the morning, things could be a little bit different, but nevertheless, that's the general vibe of the day. So one of the really great things about an East Africa Kenya migration safari is that they have this amazing experience on offer of a balloon safari. And it is indeed exactly that. We will get the group either all in one basket or split between a couple different baskets. They're usually like 8 to 12 seaters, but sometimes a little bit less, spread out and whatnot. And we'll go up pre-dawn. We'll fire up the balloons. Now, when I say we, I'm not driving any of these things. These are real deal pilots that have their captain's bands and everything, and they're capturing these balloons across the Mara, across the ecosystem. And we spend a little bit of time at lower elevations, lower altitudes. You can see here getting some closer looks. We spend some time way up there, 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet above, to get the bird's eye view, and we then land and have this nice breakfast in the middle of the Mara, and it's very, very special. So this is an interesting component. We're actually seeing this, I'll say, as a worldwide expedition leader, I'm seeing balloon safaris pick up in other places as well, but East Africa, particularly Kenya, pioneered the way to do this, and it's probably just because it's that spectacular. You can see our little giraffes here that you can see from sort of bird's eye view. It's a really special part of the trip. So I love Kenya migration safaris. This is a big cherry on top. So as we think about what's going on here, I told you I'm going to give you a little bit of a Cliff Notes version of what's happening with a Kenya migration safari. In general, they're about 8 days. We have longer versions. We have one that does combine Tanzania, but generally 8 days. This is kind of like an all-encompassing, again, out of Africa safari. It's what you are probably most expecting, again, with the rolling hills, the type of safari, that sort of movie-like feeling of things. I think it's a great first-time safari. If you haven't been there before, it is a wonderful introduction to the landscape. It's the greatest migration. It's one of the largest animal migrations on Earth. If you've watched my monarch butterfly webinars, you know technically the monarch is an animal and it is a larger migration by numbers, but nevertheless, as far as that size of a terrestrial animal, maybe by weight it's the largest migration on Earth. And it pairs, as if we're doing like a wine and cheese tasting thing here, it pairs well with a gorilla extension. So oftentimes what we'll do is folks that are coming 8 days and say, well, I really want to add a couple of days to that trip because I'm doing some international flights. This might be my one main time to get to Africa. I've always wanted to see gorillas, or I've always wanted to do even more time in the savannas. I wanted to go see XYZ. It's very easy to add extensions. And oftentimes people will go to Uganda or Rwanda, usually for about 5 or so days, to do a very purpose-built kind of in and out gorilla trekking safari to add on. So that's my thoughts from an expedition leader. We're going to move right into Uganda. So as I'm talking about that pairing, if that sort of piques your interest, you can see a little bit more about what is entailed in a classic gorilla trekking expedition, or as you'll soon learn, more of a primate expedition, because there are a lot of primates in this part of the world. So of course, we do have a standalone trip to Uganda, and this is extraordinary. We call it the Great Uganda Gorilla Safari. And although the gorillas definitely steal the show, and yes, they are all very relaxed, they're just amazing creatures to watch. We get to see a lot of other stuff too. So I think that even though the gorillas are the big draw, we're getting things like chimpanzees. We're seeing chimpanzees. We have a couple of days trekking with another of the great apes of the world, and even closer related to humans than the gorillas are. So it's really extraordinary to see these, while we might be trekking to see troops of something like anywhere from 4 to 16 gorillas. Chimps often are in these communities of up to 100 individuals. So it's pretty incredible to juxtapose and contrast that over the course of a 10-day trip. But like I said, there are 8 other species of primates in these forests that we're watching and observing, like this red colobus monkey, like golden monkeys, all sorts of different stuff. So it's a really cool thing to see. In the middle of our Uganda trip, because of the way transportation works and the transit works, there's actually a massive safari national park in the middle of Uganda known as Queen Elizabeth National Park, and it is home to classic safari wildlife. So although people might not think of going to Uganda primarily for the big cats, the leopards, the lions, the elephants, it does very, very well for that. And we do have a couple of days en route when we're going from the chimpanzee area south to the gorilla area. And in addition, it's one of the few places in the world that has very, very commonly seen tree climbing lions, like this lioness here. Really cool to see up high in these large trees. The jury's still out on exactly why they climb. I love sometimes it all boils down to, well, it's because they can. But the main thing is we often think it's to avoid any sort of conflict on the ground, avoid like parasites and things, ticks and fleas, because when they're up there, they can get to high ground and they have a much more relaxing area, and also to sort of like see the horizon. But at the end of the day, I love the most simplistic definition is that, well, because they can. But like I said, in Queen Elizabeth National Park, a very, very good chance of seeing elephants. So when, we try to go for that guaranteed 1 baby elephant per trip quota, at least 1 baby elephant, it's a great place to check that out. We've got the Kazinga Channel in Uganda, which is a fantastic water-based area. We do some boat cruises around here. What I would say probably the largest concentration of hippos I've ever seen in the Kazinga Channel in the middle of that Uganda itinerary. It's really extraordinary. But I also want to highlight the extreme differences of Uganda because it is that next level kind of safari. It's quite distinct, quite different. Immediately, notice the lodging here. We're not in those canvas tents. We're not in that out of Africa feel. We're in the jungle. We're in the hills. We're in beautiful, lush environments. We almost look like we're in the Shire here with the greenery around and sort of cobblestone. So it's a very different feel. You notice we're sort of in this upper montane rainforest, cloud forest environment. It's a little bit cooler. It's higher elevation. I think people, not knowing Uganda are often surprised by how just lush and truly beautiful it is. You probably could, put this side by side with some restaurant in the Mediterranean and you wouldn't be able to tell a difference. Yet here with this altitude, with the climate, it's very, very nice, very temperate. And this is where, one of the many places we'll have our meals. But again, when it comes to wildlife watching trips, that's our first and primary objective. It's indeed all about the gorillas. So what ends up going down is we have the first part of the trip to do other primates. We're doing hikes, we're still doing trekking, we're seeing the safari wildlife, and it's all building to this grand conclusion with the last few days down in the more or less southern part of Uganda in the windy impenetrable forest. I love that name. That's the real name. And you'll quickly learn that it is indeed impenetrable in some ways. I can only imagine some of the early explorers, just working their way through this rainforest at, a mile a day, only to encounter these mountain gorillas, centuries ago. It's a pretty impressive place. The context in which we see these primates, these apes, these mountain gorillas is extraordinary. We have 2 days to do so. We have itineraries that have more experiences with gorillas, and people often think, well, gosh, 2 days, is that enough? And frankly, it honestly is for most people. We have a longer itinerary that includes Rwanda, so you actually double the amount of gorilla viewing. It's for 2 days in Uganda and 2 days in Rwanda. But, most people will say, by the end of their second day, I've had the experiences of my lifetime. This has been fantastic. And so even though it's just a couple hours with these amazing gorillas, nobody ever goes home feeling empty-handed. So really, it's kind of, in my mind, the perfect gorilla watching itinerary. Each day is gonna be different. You will definitely view 2 different families, 2 different troops of gorillas. Even within troops, they often break off into little smaller family units. You might get the babies playing with dad here. You might get the mom with even younger babies. It's pretty extraordinary. I could go on and on showing photos of baby gorillas, and I just may. But it's people often say it was the most meaningful wildlife encounter of their lives, and I would have to agree. Looking eye to eye with these great gorillas, they do. They look at you. They interact. They are indifferent because they're largely habituated. They're used to having people around. But having them look at you face to face is pretty darn cool. So one thing I definitely wanted to spend some time talking about is the physicality of this trip. It's often what people ask most. It is a hiking trip. The days can vary. I wanted to show a couple photos here. This is that impenetrable rainforest I was talking about. There are trails, so it's not like you are hacking your way through the forest yourself. We are joined by multiple rangers and guides and porters. Notice how nobody has their camera backpack or anything on. We do employ local folks to help us get to the area. It's a great way of local employment, gives people jobs, and also makes our trek a little bit easier. The average time hiking, I would say, is 2 to 3 hours. And that's total time for the day. However, it can be longer. The gorillas do move around overnight. There are rangers and trackers that keep track of them mostly all day, every day. So they know more or less where they're going to be. I've had trips where it's quite literally 10 minutes to where the troops are. I've also had times where it is indeed several hours to get there, and it might even be several hours each way. So the thing is that you could do all this training, and you could do walking every day around your neighborhood or even doing hikes in the local hills and find that it's a lot easier than you expected. But the problem is if we get to the ranger station and they say, yeah, with such and such troop, it's gonna be 4 miles, it's gonna be an hour and a half each direction or 2.5 hours each direction. You don't want to sit it out, of course, you're there. So the physicality, I would say, of all Nat Hab trips, if you're familiar with what we do, it's one of the more challenging because you are off trail. Sometimes you see here as we're going down that the troop is just below us. It's actually just past this bush. So we're not walking through this very much, but you can see there isn't really a trail here. We are stepping over vines and logs and maybe having to brace ourselves or use a porter's hand to get sort of hoisted up a small little muddy slope. So it is a little bit more real deal hiking and trekking than the average trip that we do with Nat Hab, or certainly the average safari. Most safaris are primarily vehicle based. But you can see the rewards. I mean, it's there. It's well worth it. Look at these beautiful rolling hills. So even though it can be a little bit difficult hiking, you're immersed in beauty from start to finish. And like I said, it's not always just about the gorillas. You see a lot of other cool stuff along the way too. For photographers, it is the trip of a lifetime. I mean, to be able to photograph these guys is just extraordinary. For those that are photographers in the audience and are adept at camera gear and whatnot, I can say, being able to photograph with a little more than a 70 to 200 millimeter lens to get your best shots of the trip is really invigorating. So we can certainly talk more. I've done previous webinars on gorilla photography, so definitely check those out if you're thinking about it or if you are headed there. Or of course, you probably know how to get a hold of us, and I'm happy to help further with those photography recommendations. So thoughts from an expedition leader, we'll kind of jot these down. Uganda, it's 10 days. It's virtually year round. We have a little bit of a higher season kind of in the North American type summer months. So May through October, but it really is a year-round destination. The main attraction, clearly gorillas, but another big takeaway is it's quite multifaceted. If you are going to be the person that is remiss not to see safari wildlife, not to see a lion, not to see some antelopes, there's that too. You are going to stay in a classic safari camp for a couple nights too. Chimps, fantastic opportunity for that. Gorillas, of course. I also want to talk about Uganda versus Rwanda for a second, and even the Congo. So basically, this is the Uganda trip. I love it because it's very immersive. You are in the countrysides of Uganda. You are meeting the local people. It is very, it's spaced out nicely. It's very, very immersive and very comprehensive. If you are going to do an extension to one of your other East Africa safaris, like to Kenya or to Tanzania, I highly recommend thinking about Rwanda instead. I mean, the gorillas are mountain gorillas. They're in troops. They're the same size. The babies aren't cuter in the Uganda populations versus the Rwanda or vice versa. They're all there, but it's more of like the method of travel, how easy it is to get to the gorillas. For Uganda, it's a bit of a journey, and I think that's part of the experience because along the way, you are stopping in the Kazinga channel for hippos, and you're stopping for chimpanzee viewing. You're looking for various other primates like the colobus monkeys, the black and white colobus, the red colobus, and all these other cool critters. Rwanda is a little bit more purpose-built, and so you can do so in a lot shorter time. Whereas it might take us, the course of the trip to finally get to the grand conclusion for Uganda. Rwanda as an extension, add 4 days to go see gorillas for a couple of days. It's very, very doable. And again, our expert pairing and vice versa, it pairs very well with a migration safari to go to the savannas of Kenya and or Tanzania. So lots to love here. So again, as we look, that's sort of our expose on East Africa. The other main area is going to be Southern Africa for safaris, and we're talking about two specific areas, Botswana and Namibia. So when we get to Southern Africa, we see the environment does change. We're seeing a lot more water. You don't necessarily have the rolling hills. We're sort of in and out of forests. Oftentimes, so we're going to be starting with Botswana here, and all of our Botswana trips are actually going to start with the Zambezi River and famous Victoria Falls, which is really, really cool. Not only is it a wonder of the world, it's a UNESCO heritage site. I had to Google this before the presentation, but every second, 250,000 gallons of water pours over the edge of this fall, or every 2 seconds, an Olympic-sized swimming pool is going over the edge. Fun facts to take away from this presentation that I just learned myself. But yeah, every 2 seconds, Olympic-sized swimming pool. And I don't mean like the rec center swimming pool. I mean like the real deal Olympic pool. So it's just a sight to behold. And so for the first couple of days, our intro to the region, intro to Southern Africa, it's right there in the edge with Botswana. So it's a really, really great way to begin the adventure. The Zambezi River itself is extraordinary. The bird life, is amazing with the bee eaters in the previous slide. This is an African fish eagle, looks quite much like our bald eagle here in North America. Water monitor lizards, a really interesting sight to behold. Again, hippos, it's a riverine, it's a water ecosystem. The hippos love it. The crocs love it as well. A little chicana in the background, the bird there. And I would say as far as this region, really this trip, and we're talking about our Botswana trips that do begin in Victoria Falls on the Zambian side, It's no doubt some of the best sunrises and sunsets I've seen in my life, bar none. But really, like all things we're talking about here, the wildlife viewing is just gold medal from start to finish. This is a photo from the green season, which is going to be kind of like in the November to March timeframe. We'll go over seasonality in Botswana here in a second because it does have a lot to love in the year-round aspect of things. But you'll notice, regardless of whether it's the green season or the dry season, it is more lush. There is more vegetation. You're in and out of forest. You're seeing exceptional wildlife that is, very difficult to see elsewhere, like wild dogs. But you're also seeing the old favorites, the giraffe with the little oxpecker bird here. I'm circling with my mouse cursor. It is really amazing. I would say, not playing favorites here, but if you were to poll our office folks, we often go on site inspections and we get a chance to go on a lot of trips that we offer here at Natural Habitat. I would imagine that if you polled everybody and did a little chart in the graph, I would say our Botswana trip might be the staff favorite. So take it for what you want, but it's really, really that good. A big thing about Botswana is indeed the secluded nature of it. We don't just call it that for kicks. It is extremely intimate. The way that the private concessions work, the way that the local ownership of land and safari parks and all that, it is completely wild. There's nothing to stop these wildlife moving from here all the way to Angola or up to Kenya, except for different ecosystems and sort of natural barriers, ecosystem barriers, but they're free to roam. It's completely wild, but because it's so well taken care of, wildlife thrive. We can also, because it's very, very little visitation in Botswana compared to most other safari areas, you can indeed get closer to wildlife without inhibiting them whatsoever. They're completely indifferent. A safari vehicle is just that. It's just a big thing on the landscape. They go about their daily life. There is no environmental negative impact, or very, very little, of course. And we can get these really cool photos and really good sights and sounds of some of the greatest wildlife in all of Africa. You don't get the 1.5 million wildebeest and the zebra and all that. I view it a little bit more like a quality over quantity. Yes, you might have literally seen a million animals, maybe not quite that many. It's hard to see the whole migration at once, but you'll have seen tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of animals from, especially from the balloons when you see these sea of migration movement. But the animals you do see, the wild dogs, some of the lesser cats that you might not see elsewhere, the quantity of lions, and I think it's one of the better places to see things like hyena. It's got one of the largest elephant populations in all of Africa. So if we're going to go for that guaranteed one baby elephant quota, up that a few levels. Here, it's got 60 to 70,000 elephants that go through sort of a mini migration along the northern part of Botswana in the Okavango Delta area. So really, really extraordinary. For whatever reason, leopards are always one of the more difficult cats to see on safari. Yet in Botswana, they just seem to, I don't want to say they're everywhere because it still takes time to find these things, but it's like you're gonna see leopards when you're there. It's really, really extraordinary. The landscape is quite interesting. From the ground, it looks like a forested area, but it is a watery labyrinth. We see the Okavango Delta. So a really cool facet of the Botswana trips and the overall safari experience there is that it's not only Land Rovers. It's not only those vehicle-based 4x4 type safaris. We can get in things like mokoros, traditional dugout canoes, and we can slow down and look at the little things. I would imagine she's looking at a little lily here. Oftentimes there are little frogs or crickets on these. We will get in metal bottom skiffs, motored skiffs, and it's just like the bigger wildlife safari, but you're seeing elephants from water level, or you're seeing hippos from water level. You might be seeing a lion coming for a drink at water level. And it just provides that extra dimension that you're really not going to see. You're probably not expecting it in anywhere else in Africa, but it is that unexpected that really sends Botswana very, very high, in my opinion, for an overall quality of safari. So I could go on and on, of course, about the wildlife and the experiences. I mean, that is what we're there for, but I would be remiss if I didn't show you some of the styles of camps that we're at. It's going to keep with that Nat Hab nature of things. We've got Tuto here again, Star Safari Guide. The camps, even though we call them tented camps and they're semi-permanent, they're not too shabby. This is your home when you're there. It's enough space to get your luggage out. There's a little outdoor shower here. There's an indoor shower, just sort of, if I'm looking to the right of this photo, hot water, flush toilets, all that great stuff. But it's the sense of place. It's the fact that these have ultra minimal impact. It's the fact that because of the way these are designed, you can quite literally be stopping from your morning coffee and go see the elephant, rummaging around in the bushes out front. is pretty cool. Now this is, you know, a pretty special experience. And like I said, really from start to finish, the sunsets and sunrises, oh, they are quality. So, you know, let's go over some of the things that makes Botswana superlative, as all these safaris are very, very unique and special in their own right. I would say if there is a single superlative, it's the most remote and wild. It is probably the greatest array of wildlife viewing possibilities and activities. It's the most likely the greatest diversity of wildlife, I would say. You get this really fantastic bonus of Victoria Falls. The camps are sensational. We're looking at a couple different safaris. We have a shorter one that's around 10 days and a longer one that's a little around 13 days. And of course, there is the opportunity to extend these as well. It is definitely a year-round destination. I love the green season, which is this would be the dry season or the high season, May through October. It's when it is indeed drier. People do like that because you can see a little bit further into the landscape. You can see further into the bush. It's a bit drier. Wildlife are a little bit more predictably found around the watering holes and places that they do need to congregate for food, for water, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, you will probably see more animals during this time that I'm telling you right here. The green season, maybe we can take some more questions at the end, but the green season, which is more or less like November through March, you know, if you were to go there and someone were to tell you afterwards that you would see more wildlife at any time of year, you'd say, no way. I mean, you got to be kidding, the number of animals and amazing wildlife we've seen at this time of year, because it's still really, really, really great. Green season, verdant green landscape. It is the birthing season for baby animals. So there's a lot to love about any time in Botswana. It's great if you want to go back a second time at a different season, because you're getting a little bit different views of things. And again, pairing well with Namibia. It's a very, very interesting contrast when we think about the lush sort of watery labyrinth of Botswana compared to the dry Namib desert. It's a really cool juxtaposition all in one trip. It's a big way. I mean, if you're going to pair the two, it warrants a very big trip, but we can provide that. And of course, as you'll see in a bit, Namibia is a great sort of multi-time safari destination. Before we go into Namibia, sort of the last place on this list, I wanted to quickly buzz through a few slides showing the safari vehicles. So this is one view here. You can see these are usually individual seats. We always, in terms of like the capacity of our trips, we will never put people in the middle seats, or we will never, in other words, we won't have so many that people can't get their own window seat. That's a huge tenet of natural habitat adventures, because if wildlife's moving from the right to the left, if you need a space for your camera bag, or just your backpack, your binoculars, having that middle seat is huge. So that's an important point to note. I also wanted to make a mention that we have just launched our Photo Pro itineraries. For all of our trips out there, we have a photography version, and we've had that for years, and they're wonderful itineraries. We have recently launched another level beyond that, and if you follow me on these webinars, you probably heard me do a dedicated presentation to that. But for those people with big lenses like this that want to get even more out of their photo safari at the tip-top level, check out our Photo Pro safaris to Kenya, and that's something we're going to be doing for you know, indefinitely, because we love what we've designed there. Moving on to the vehicles, again, just wanted to show you the back of the vehicle. Ignore the lion here. The back of the vehicle here, we store, you know, blankets and maybe like water bottles and stuff in the back of this trunk. So it's very comfy, ponchos in case we get a little downpour, because we do want to be most immersed in the landscape. We want to have those open walls, open windows whenever possible. You'll notice in certain destinations we do have walled sides, but when we can, we do have open windows. Great for photography, great for viewing. And again, this is us parked here and waiting for the wildlife to come around, and you know, a pack of like 25 wild dogs just go zooming by in a complete frenzy. Pretty darn crazy to see. So Namibia, let's kind of move on to this. So yeah, right off the bat, so you see here, this is a classic desert Namibia safari vehicle. Not for every single place in Namibia, but you'll notice, you know, in the drier, maybe cooler, maybe dustier landscapes, we do have walled sides, especially in areas where we're not necessarily going specifically on wildlife viewing, like in the couple of days in the mid-desert as part of this trip. But we'll go more into that when we cover all the rest of Namibia. Just a quick photo of Callie, one of our guides here, setting up a little happy hour, or a sundowner as they call it, next to the vehicle. It's very key that these vehicles have pop-out sides for the mobile snack bar. Other vehicles we're going to be using on the trip is a really, really key part of our safaris is we try to incorporate charter flights wherever it's logical, wherever it's possible. Part of this is the ease. Part of it is just being able to see the landscape. It's absolutely exquisite from above, but it's also saving a heck of a lot of driving time. I like to say, what we can do in a 10-day safari would take maybe others 14 or 16 days to do, just because of how quickly, we can be at one camp, drive to the airstrip, 20 minutes later, shoo the ostriches off the runway, take off, be at the next camp in 30 or 45 minutes, do a quick buzz to shoo the ostriches off. They like runways. I don't know why. But land, and then we're right on safari drive again. Like, we lose no time. So it's a very, I hesitate saying efficient, because, efficient, you're on vacation, but nevertheless, it's a great way to see a lot in a really modest amount of time when we're talking like 10 or 13 days, very doable. Quick little view inside one of the planes here. We're oftentimes using the caravans. They're like in the 9 to 12 guest range for inside the plane. We sometimes might use smaller planes if it necessitates such, but usually it's those, I say larger, they're probably still considered small by many standards, but yeah, like 12 seaters, that kind of thing. The landscapes from planes are a big part of the safari. I wouldn't necessarily go on safari only to see it from the air, but to add that extra level, kind of like how I was talking with the balloon safari, it's a really next level way to see and do things. So again, we're sort of flying over Namibia here as we swoop into our final part of the presentation. This is Sossusvlei, which is the Great Sand Dune Sea of Namibia, which we're going to see from the ground here in a few images. But seeing this from the air, like these 500-foot tall sand dunes, is just extraordinary. And I always love looking at like big geological processes like this, or even the Okavango Delta, because it kind of just mirrors, on a very, very grand scale, what you'd see from like ripples at the tidal area in a beach. It's all this sort of same pattern, just in like a 10,000 times fold sort of measurement. It's really, really fun to see. So as we conclude here, Southern Africa, we're talking about Great Namibia Wildlife Safari. This is a really special one, and I'm going to say right off the bat, this is usually not someone's first time safari in Africa. I think it's got great wildlife. It's got a national park half the size of Switzerland that is in the northern area known as Etosha, which has all the safari wildlife you want. It's got the lions, it's got the elephants, and we'll see more photos of that in a second. But really, in general, Namibia is quite a bit more of a sense of place. It's the wilderness that you're in. It's the landscapes, landscape photographers, people that just love big open areas and true wild, like you feel, you are in the middle of nowhere. It is a really cool experience. When you do see the wildlife, again, Etosha is packed full of wildlife, but about 2/3 of the trip is, again, where and how you see the wildlife. So it's not that they're not there, but they are fewer and farther between than the packed Okavango Delta or the million wildebeest and zebra in East Africa. But look at the sea. When you do find that elephant, the rhino, where and how you see it is really, really cool. Look at that landscape. So it's a lot, again, it's sort of that quality, not quantity vibe, because it is much more of a landscape destination, but we still get some great wildlife, up close views. One of the most unique things we do on our Namibia trips is actually trek and track desert rhinos. This is basically a subspecies of the black rhino. And it's the desert rhino. It's slightly smaller, a little bit more reduced in size because of the harsh landscape. But we'll actually track these with scientists on foot for a couple of days, right in the middle of our safari, and it's a whole different experience. So again, look at Namibia for that X factor experience. Tracking these rhinos with researchers, actually participating in census surveys of where the rhinos are, getting little note card readings, and then coming back to some world-class safari lodges for a little fireside chat at night. Really, really great, and mixed with all the rest of the great camps, not too shabby in Namibia either. But again, it is a wonderful wildlife safari because of Etosha National Park. We're viewing incredible animals in really, really great density. I think it's home to the happiest elephants in all of Africa. So although, maybe we don't have quite the same baby elephant guarantee here, you get really happy elephants as they play in the mud. It's really fun to see. All the big predators, the lions, the cheetah are in the area as well. And again, it's kind of that, let's get out there, let's get far more removed than anywhere else we've probably been in our lives. Let's do it in style, let's do it in the creature comforts, but let's do it in a very authentic way. There's hiking involved in the Namibia trip, so going to Sossusvlei in a super iconic area with the dead trees and this salt pan, almost this massive, massive salt sheet with these towering orange sand dunes. You can climb these, you can hike to the top if you'd like, We do guide that part as well. And it's just it's the X Factor trip. So expedition leader thoughts, it's a real traveler safari. So those people that have traveled extensively, probably already done an African safari, and really are looking for, what are the really crazy things that I can do as I start to round out my travel list, etc. It's perfect for a second time safari to Africa. I mean, you can absolutely go on your first safari to Africa, but expedition leader recommendations. It's a really unique combo of landscapes and very unique wildlife. These desert adaptations where you're going to see this Hemsbach in the middle of a 500-foot tall sand dune sea. It's really fascinating. Our classic trip is 10 days. Although it's a year-round destination, April through November is their drier season, it's their cooler season. You'll get a little bit less clouds, so photographers might like something in this April to November time period because you do get bluer skies. The blue juxtaposed with the orange sand dunes is spectacular, and it does pair very well with Botswana. Again, it turns into a longer trip because it's hard just to add a couple of days, hard to justify adding only a couple of days in either or destination, but it's a really, really great 1-2 punch if you were to do both together. So before we do the Q&A, I wanted to quickly talk about sort of the cultural aspect to our trips. So we, of course, are a wildlife travel company first and foremost, but when we are immersed in these landscapes with these communities, we are immersed in the cultures too. The culture is part of the landscape and vice versa. So although I don't have a ton of slides of various performances or things that we might or might not see, we are interacting with folks on a day-to-day basis. These are the people that are our local trackers. They are our guides. They might show us, how they make fire, how they might set traps back in the day as Sand Bushman people. They might teach us a little bit about their local language. The Maasai tribe, they might put on a little bit of a cultural interaction. We could learn from them, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that this is indeed part of the trip because we often will get questions. It's not first and foremost, but the way we do our safaris, we're sort of immersed in this in the first place. So it's kind of present throughout. So that kind of has it. We've got 4 amazing safaris, really spanned the entire realm of African safari travel. And with that, I'll thank you for listening, and I'd love to answer questions. I'm sure I have some good ones.
Thanks, Court. Yeah, we do have some good ones. I just want to remind everyone who's watching, if you have a question today, you can submit those in your control panel under the questions field. And first, I'd just like to say, I know some of you were hoping that you would hear about some other safaris that we have to offer. So if we didn't cover the area you'd like to hear about, I do invite you to visit our website. Just go to nathab.com/Africa, and you can find all of our Africa safari options. Okay, Court, first question. Just to get it out of the way, we have a lot of people wondering about COVID protocols, and I know things are constantly changing week to week. It's different, and I know you're not the head of our safety COVID protocol team, but I wonder if you could just address it a little bit really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, there's a lot of different ways that question could be asked, or sort of like the information you're trying to get behind that. But let me just kind of, as an overarching thing, say, travel really is looking good for this coming Africa safari season. It very much comes down to your personal preference and your sort of tolerance for being on airplanes and all that sort of stuff. But it's looking good. We are operational. We are gung ho for getting back into travel, getting back into the safaris. So yeah, we are planning on running these trips basically, starting, I won't say now because some of these seasons still have to start sort of in May or June, et cetera, et cetera. But nevertheless, it's looking good. Now, in general, you're probably wondering a little bit more about well, how is it safe? Why is it safe, et cetera, et cetera. I would definitely recommend you read up or watch one of our other webinars that address all the COVID protocols. I can say very briefly is that we have a lot of COVID protocols. Some of the impetus is on you as a traveler, like to document vaccination if you are eligible. We expect that. There are various tests that must happen before going into a country or getting out of the country. But fortunately, when you go with a safari outfitter like us, that we've been researching and living this COVID era travel for many, many months now, we facilitate all that. So we completely have your hand, we have your back, and how it all has to happen. You don't have to think too much about it because we give you the play-by-play on what does need to happen. As far as on trip, things are spaced out more in terms of distance. We are instituting all sorts of things like hygienic things, from hand sanitizing station to wash basins. The list goes on. I am definitely not the best person to say how it works in every camp, in every country, in every region, everything, but just know that we are hyper fixated on that aspect. But the biggest thing really is that the news is that we are looking to have everybody join that is vaccinated, starting, I believe, on one of our summer trips, like July 1. So that's ensuring that when we go to these areas, that we remain safe for the local communities as well as each other for travel's sake. There's a lot more to talk about on that. So if you see any other specific questions that might be more targeted, I'm happy to address those. In addition, contacting our office, we are very ready to explain the story on that. So please let us know how we can address your specific question.
Yep, every country has different rules and regulations, and we're very aware of that. So if you have specific questions about any country, definitely give us a call or send us an email, and we're more than happy to help you out. And we have, as Court mentioned, we have all of our safety protocols on our website, and we're continuing to update those as things change.
And
okay,
I will mention real quickly that, sorry, Kendall, all 4 trips and all 4 regions that I talked about today are open for travel for this upcoming safari season. I didn't mention anything, there are still places in the world that are not quite ready. We hope them to be soon, but these are like full green means go kind of thing.
Absolutely. Okay, we're getting close to the top of the hour, so I really want to get to some questions here. So someone's wondering, if they go to East Africa, will they be disappointed if they don't see a Mara River crossing?
No. I mean, there's so much to African safaris. The river crossings, I'm glad you brought that up, because it's not a, even though I guarantee a baby elephant per trip, I don't guarantee seeing the full swing of a river crossing. No, I should probably also say I don't actually guarantee seeing a baby elephant. That's on recording, all right? That's on tape. I redacted it. I'm just sort of teasing. No, I mean, the river crossings are really fascinating, and we do structure the trip to give us our best chances. But so here's the thing, is that the river crossings happen in a very, very specific area, and they happen really randomly. Like it's, they might talk to one another, the wildebeest, and say, hey, like at 5 p.m., let's go check out that cliff, and let's see if we want to just run like 10,000 strong through the river. But we don't pick up on that. We don't quite, hear them talk about those things. So it's totally random. So you are kind of in this constant flux. If you want to really increase your chances, you have to wait there for a long period of time. We will do it strategically, but meanwhile, if you spend all day every day just waiting, there's all this other great stuff happening that you're not seeing. So it's a balancing act, but rest assured we know how to balance it, and we do it in a really, really great way. To you have a very good chance. But as with wildlife, things are unpredictable, and it's the thrill of not knowing if you're going to see it that I think makes the energy on safaris so invigorating, so palpable. Is it's the pursuit, So hopefully that kind of cleared it. But no, there's a lot of other great stuff. That's again, most of these things I talk about are cherries on top. Just seeing your first herd of 200 impala, you're going to get goosebumps. I mean, it's extremely fascinating and really life-changing to be on an African safari. Like I said in the very beginning, you can take anybody off the street. I don't care, if they have ever watched wildlife in their life, and you put them on African safari, and they're going to have the time of their lives.
100%, Court, absolutely. Okay, so you touched on this a little bit briefly in your presentation, but someone was just wondering if you could go over what the restroom and shower washing facilities are like at all of these camps. I know they're going to vary for each camp, but if you can give us a generalization.
Yeah, in general, everything has a private bathroom, everything has a private shower. So that's the first thing right off the bat. A lot of these camps have flush toilets, and they have, genuine hot water heated showers, like from a boiler, from a solar panel. So they're like, even though you might, have a view of the Okavango Delta, which is different from your home, it doesn't feel that much different. Like it's actually pretty normal. Some camps, it's not all of them, but some of them will have eco composting toilets. They might have what's known as bucket showers, where like literally when you get back from your safari drive, someone will be waiting, be like, are you ready for your shower? And you say, yes, I would like it. And he gets the hot water ready, and they basically get like a large, bucket's not the right word, I'm making it seem too basic, but like outside there's a thing that they fill with hot water, so you have like a 5 or 10 minute shower inside in privacy in a normal looking shower. But that's the only thing that might be slightly atypical, is the eco composting toilets and what's known as a bucket shower. It's still hot water, it's still great, it's still refreshing. But the flip side of that is you probably won't care at all, because when you get to those areas, it means you're further out there in more beauty, in more wilderness, seeing more wildlife, because they can't support some of those things as you get to the very, very tippy tip end of the extreme wilderness out there. So still creature comforts.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to move on to the gorilla trips here. Someone was just wondering if you could just reiterate how strenuous are these trips? Like what kind of physical shape do you need to be in? And also talk about the altitude as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk about altitude first. We are anywhere from about 5,000 to 8,000 feet altitude where we're sleeping and where we're hiking while on our gorilla trekking safaris. And that goes for even like sort of that middle safari portion. So 5,000, 8,000, you know, for Uganda specifically, it's a little bit in a lower range. So 8 is on the extreme end. But the trick is you got to be comfy with that. The other trick is that the treks usually are a couple, and this is gonna be very general, but I'll explain why I'm being general and vague, a couple to a few hours of hiking over the course of the day. The reason is because there can be a very big stratification of that. It could be on, you know, much less than that. It could be even a little bit more. Generally, they're not more than a couple, 2 to 3 hours of hiking round trip for the day. But I do view them as physical. I do view them as strenuous. You are hiking pretty much that whole time. It's in the range of, let's say like 4 to 5, let's say that the upper range is like 4 to 5 miles each way. Generally, you know, people, we walk at about 2 to 3 miles an hour. It can slow down if we're in undulating terrain going up or down. But the trick is that you want to be prepared for that upper end of the range, because if you get there, you don't want to say, well, I can't go see him. So you want to pay particular attention to how we write up our physical requirements. It's on our website. It's on the trip page. It goes into more detail, but you know, generally I would say if you are capable of walking around maybe 5 miles round trip for several hours at a time, you are definitely in range to consider this trip. I would recommend almost anybody do a little bit of extra exercise and preparation for this trip, to walk a little bit more, maybe walk with a backpack, even though you won't have to carry your backpack because there are porters that do so. Just getting that training for walking. If you don't live at elevation, there's nothing you can do. But because we do start off the trip at elevation and we're not, you know, the chimpanzee trekking is a lot less rigorous than the gorilla trekking. We work our way towards it. So most people, I mean, we don't have a lot of people that cannot complete the trek, mainly because we prep a lot of time and, you know, people take it, you know, pretty seriously in terms of getting a little bit extra fit before they embark on an expedition like this. I hope, was that thorough enough, hopefully?
Yeah,
There's a little bit of ambiguity there because not every trek is the same. So I'm trying to give an average. Yeah, but you know, let's talk more. Certainly, if you're not satisfied with that answer, we have a lot more information we can share on an individual level and kind of get feedback from you. Like what are you most concerned about? Is it the altitude? Is it the duration? Is it the hills? Is it the steps? That kind of thing. Walking sticks are always provided. You know, there's a lot of considerations that make it easier than you might be thinking.
And related to that, someone was wondering, besides the gorilla safaris, what physical requirements are there for our normal safaris? How physically fit do you need to be for those?
Yeah, great question. Very, very low in terms of requirements. The main thing is that getting in and out of the safari vehicles, you know, you have to have a pretty big step up, usually grab someone's hand and kind of climb over some seats. You know, it requires a little bit of agility there, but we're not hiking long distances. We're not trekking. It's mostly a vehicle-based safari. I'd say you have to be stable and strong enough to, you know, to kind of hold your core tight as you're bouncing around a safari vehicle. But no, there's no like minimum kind of physical walking or trekking fitness involved in the trip. So yeah, it's definitely among most, if not all of our trips, some of the most easy to do, regardless of physicality level that you might be in yourself.
Can you talk about the charging situation at the camps? Are people able to charge all of their cameras and laptops?
Yeah, in general, yes. You can charge anything you want. You can charge daily. The only difference, and this does vary a lot, and I'm not going to go into the details, but depending on the trip, depending on the camp, there might be a central charging station, like where the dining room is. So you might, during the middle part of the day, you might have your camera battery fresh and charged in your camera to walk around the camp and take some cool photos here and there, but you might have a battery charging over where you're gonna, you know, pick up the safari vehicles before the afternoon drive. That's usually the exception, not the rule, but that does happen on safari. It happens at least once in Kenya, and it happens at least once in Botswana. That's the only real consideration, but I always recommend for charging things, keeping an extra battery or so, but there are daily charging possibilities. So even though that's the exception and not the rule, the rest of the time you're on normal 110 volt. Most of the rooms have adapters already, and you can charge, morning, noon, and night.
Great. Okay, last question I'm gonna take today. Something that people are often curious about is what's the difference between a photo safari and a non-photo safari?
Yeah, so I like to start off that by saying, all of our trips are photo safaris in the sense that if you have a camera, which most people do these days, you can still get great photos with an iPhone, even if that's the extent. You're going to get great photos. I mean, it's not like we don't put you in the position to get a great photo. We definitely do that. The biggest difference is that on your photo trips, your expedition leader, who will be with you from start to finish, is going to be a very accomplished, if not professional, nature and wildlife photographer. This person is going to be able to instruct you on techniques. We're going to be able to help, tool with your camera, challenge you with different settings. They might give you little challenges and assignments. They might review photos with you in the evening if that's something that you're interested in doing. So it's just got that stuff built into it. That person on a photo safari is still going to be an amazing naturalist, a top level safari guide. Tuto is a photo guide and a non-photo guide. So it's really group composition. You're surrounded by fellow photographers if you're on a photo trip. And it's also just kind of like how much will be discussed about photography during the course of the trip. On a quote unquote non-photo trip, you will return home with thousands of great photos, but you may not be able to get that instruction if you're interested because your expedition leader may or may not be a versed photographer.
Great. Thank you so much, Court. That was great. So I'm going to call it there with questions. Looks like we're about 5 minutes past the top of the hour. I do want to invite all of our audience members watching, if you have further questions, if we didn't get to your question today, please get in touch with us. You can give us a call at the number on the screen or send us an email at that info@nathab.com email address. We're more than happy to answer your questions. I know we covered a lot of material today, so I want to make sure that we give you the answers you need. Okay, Court, I'm going to hand it back over to you for closing comments.
Well, thank you, Kendall. Thank you for those in the audience. Great questions. I really enjoyed talking about this. To me, the excitement is in the air. We are proceeding very cautiously. We're very, very strategically in all this, but we can see that this is back on the horizon, and it's a very exciting time to be in the adventure travel space. And we hope you'll join us, sooner than later. But we're here when ready, and lots of excitement to come when it comes to Africa and really worldwide safaris when we're at it. So hope to see you out there.
Great. Thanks again, Court. And my thanks as well to everyone who tuned in today. Be sure to join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. We did record today's presentation, and we'll have the replay available on our website soon. And with that, I'll conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody.